Hey, Roy, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. So, for the ones that have not heard of you yet, tell us who you are and what do you do?
Yeah, I'm a CEO, founder of Noodle Wave Media. We're a full stack digital marketing agency focused on the healthcare vertical. I've been doing that for 11 years. Prior to that, I was in the music industry as a music producer, and I've got kind of that entrepreneurial spirit. So I flipped a couple other businesses along the way. Father of two amazing boys, and a passionate creative and marketer.
Awesome. And how did you get started and how long ago did you start your agency?
Yeah, so I started it probably in 2000, around 2010. I had just kind of rotated out of the music industry, and I'd spent 10 years there writing music for artists. And I got signed to a production deal in New York, and I was writing artists for my idols. And then I did a stint in Korea, and then I decided, I'm kind of done with this. It's time to start something new. And I realized at that time I was been in the content game for 10 years. And I thought, boy, if I combine that with using the kind of ability to create content and find a thread that resonates with people and tie that to helping small businesses, because I had a marketing education and experience already, that could be something. And so I started that 10 years ago with that exact premise of leveraging content to help build brand equity for clients. But at that time, like, and you'll know this, Jason, like that wasn't a thing really. Like large brands were doing that, leveraging YouTube and all kinds of other platforms. But the small business owner didn't really have access because they just didn't know how to do it. And so I started it at that time with that premise in mind. And I just remember people thought, yeah, but like, who's going to search for a content marketing agency? Like, that just seems offbeat and really way off the normal path because, their traditional brick and mortar agency was the way to go. So I don't know, but I think it's going to be something. And of course, we all know that became the thing. Uh, Content marketing became the thing. And we've been on a steady increase and incline from there, leveraging that idea that kind of the small to medium sized business owner doesn't realize that the biggest piece of equity that they have is the knowledge in between their ears and the experience that they have. So we just provided them the platform and support to do that.
That's
And here
awesome.
we are, 2021, and yeah, we're still
22.
around. 22, geez, 22, man. Yeah, I lost a year there. I think we all lost a couple of years there.
We all did lose a couple years. What was the biggest deal that happened to your agency, or what's the most exciting thing to you and why when you were growing your agency?
I definitely would have to say that I built the agency on the remote working model or distributed model, however you want to call it. And I did it really out of just trying to solve problems. I couldn't afford office space. Like I just didn't have the cash flow. But then also at the same time, it's like, but does it really even make sense for me to have an office? Because it's just going to eat into my margins. This is just the way that I thought at that time. Thought, well, why can't I just hire a bunch of people who live wherever but are super talented and have them work on these projects with me? It ended up, of course, being very prescient, and not until COVID hit that everybody else got it. But of course, leading up to that, that trend was already there, right? So COVID, obviously, the big pull ahead. But I would be championing this whole remote working lifestyle, and people just didn't get it. Like there was another thing that people thought I was crazy. Like, well, you need an office, right? Because you need to have clients come and see you. I was like, I don't think so. I don't think I need that. And for us, that ended up probably being the single most important decision that we made as an agency, just to keep that. And my vision was always, can I scale this? Could it be like from one man band man show to like 10 staff? Then how about 20? Then how about 30? Then how about 100? How about 300? And keep going from there. And that's just kind of what's continued to happen today. And of course, when COVID hit, people are like, oh, okay, I get it. Makes total sense. And now at a global scale, we're doing this thing.
What was yeah, I mean I love the remote thing because you can recruit way out far, all over the world rather than just driving distance. And then also too, your team works a hell of a lot harder because they're not in a commute. I remember when I had the agency in Atlanta, I had some people that were in a car for 2 hours a day. That could have been
Yeah,
doing other things, having fun,
totally.
relaxing, working on the business, maybe.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and that was the real value proposition. And actually, I don't know if a lot of people realize this, though. Maybe now they do, but at the time, have being in a remote working model, only certain people would thrive under that environment. Like you and I would probably both know, like people that just they need to be around people. They need to be in an office, and that works for certain people, and that doesn't work for other people. So it ended up becoming a pretty cool automatic filter for developing a culture of people who worked the same way, who thought the same way, who had the same kind of time management skills and critical thinking skills. So just again, like when I say that that was the single most important decision, not only from an operational standpoint, but like from a culture standpoint, from a productivity standpoint, like you mentioned, it had a lot of trickle down effects by
You
making
know,
that choice.
other than doing the remote working and figuring that out, what's the most important thing that you learned running your agency in the past years?
For sure, the other thing would be probably niching down in a specific vertical. That's super key. I always knew that at some point that I would want to either exit the business or develop a strategic partnership. I knew we didn't have the necessarily the resources or the kind of client base to be, a bigger agency, and our my strategy was always to be part of a bigger agency. So I just thought about like what would make us attractive to an agency that already has and does everything. And for us, that would just be to let's find a special, let's niche down, and it kind of just organically happened. Like I didn't set out to build a company that like provided marketing services to the oral health care space. It's not something that you like set out to do
Hmm.
necessarily. It was just through relationships, and as I kind of saw that continuing to grow and our reputation growing there, I was like, okay, we've got to double down on this vertical. So by doing niching down, two things happen. One, yes, we prepared ourselves for an eventual exit where we gained domain expertise in this one vertical. But it also, from an implementation standpoint, when we ran campaigns, it was just so much easier. Like there was no learning curve. Over the years, we developed expertise in orthodontic care, dental care, pediatric dentistry, all these different verticals. So we knew that our target audience, we knew what the client did, we knew what the value propositions were in general, and all we had to kind of do was hunt for the nuance of that specific client in that specific geographic area. So there wasn't this. We compressed the discovery process time to a really short period of time because we know the industry, right?
That's
So
awesome.
that was the other kind of key thing for us.
Awesome. And eventually you sold the agency. So walk us through kind of why did you decide to sell and kind of walk us through that process as well.
Well, it's funny because my own personal journey was thinking about, when is it time to kick in the strategic partnership that I always envisioned would need to happen? What timing does that look like? And when does that need to happen? And as I was going through that journey of searching, I found you through that journey, which was so funny. Um, and kudos to you and your funnels and your content and having stuff out there that allowed other agency owners to discover that. And I learned a lot just from reading some of your content about what I needed to do to prepare. But I also engaged you in a conversation at that time, and you were gracious enough to entertain just a quick chat and let me know that there's some things that maybe I need to work on. And so um, I think for me personally, it was just knowing that it was time for me to add another layer of value to the clients, but also being real with myself in terms of what I wanted out of my lifestyle. There's kind of a like I could easily say, I could grow this business and 10x it, in the next 5 years if I wanted to. But what's the cost, right? Like, what am I giving up in terms of my lifestyle in order to do that? I think when we get into leadership conferences or we talk with other entrepreneurs, we talk about the KPIs and the metrics and the sales figures and all that stuff. But oftentimes we don't talk necessarily about what's the lifestyle cost. What is the other side of that coin? And I think for me, it just wasn't worth it to do it alone. And that was the point when I said, okay, it's time to find a strategic partnership. And And that's what set me on that journey. And it's funny because it didn't happen for 2 years, right? Like I started it and I thought about it and I marinated on it, but I think at the time you were like, "Hey, there's some things you work on," and then 2 years later I was like, "Hey, I worked on these things. What do you think?" And then the conversation continued from there.
Yeah. Yeah, I tell agency owners, the ones that have visions for possibly selling, like, because too, like, if you get to a certain point, you may not want to sell. It's not right for everyone. And sometimes Thomas and everybody at Republic gets mad at me because I'll talk people out of it sometimes. But like,
Yeah, right.
you shouldn't sell. I was like, you got everything you want. And then sometimes other people are like, no, I want to take chips off the table. I want to sell. I want to do other things. I want to, have a life after, selling the agency. And I'm like, okay, cool. And I'm glad that you came back, because I always tell people, start relationships with the people now that you think could buy you later on.
Hmm.
And right, like we talked 2 years prior, and then we were able to strike up a deal, and I'm so excited that we were able to do that. And too many people think about, well, I'll sell when things are bad. I'm like, no,
Yeah,
no, no,
right.
no, no. You're not going to get what you want. You're not going to be happy afterwards, because it has to work for both parties. Sell when things are really good.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and it was interesting. I like that what you said about relationships because I did explore, going the broker route, people had approached me over the years. I said, "Oh, let me just entertain some of these conversations," but there wasn't that like relationship aspect. It's very transactional in a sense. And at that point, I was like, "Wait a second, I gotta reach back to Jason because we had a conversation about this before." Like I actually kind of had forgotten because there was all these other opportunities coming down the pipeline, and then um, it just so happened that it was the relationship based connection that ended up working out, right?
Yeah, it's. I mean, that's what I tell everybody, is like, your net worth is what your network is. And the people that and you hang out, that you trust, and they trust you. That, I mean, that's why we've been doing the mastermind for so long. It's about getting the right people around so you can create those relationships over time. Tell us what surprised you going through the acquisition. Was there anything that
um,
surprised you?
for sure, yeah. It was a lot more challenging than I thought it was going to be, right? Like I know you had prepared me with a couple of kind of points about there's just going to be a lot of chaos. And of course, Thomas and the team at Republics, they've been through it a million times. And so they knew what was going to happen. Like they're preparing me like it's going to get busy. Um, but it's very challenging to switch the hat between all of these corporate finance and other aspects of your business that perhaps, I mean, some industry leaders and agency owners might know that stuff really well. Some don't, and they leave it to their bookkeeping and accounting team. I think it's wise to have a breadth of knowledge across all of those disciplines, right? Um, but to the extent of like doing the deal, managing lawyers, managing accountants, and then in a very active way, more so than you would normally running your business. And then on top of that, running your business, right? Became pretty challenging. So it was, I knew that it was going to be a weighty, I mean, it's such a deeply personal decision that you make. So that's the other component. Like there's this emotional attachment to going through this process. And then you're like, doubting yourself or like, is this the right time? Should I be doing this now? And then there's negotiating aspects. So this is all these like emotions that are happening, right?
It's my baby. How can I
It's my
sell my
baby. How can
baby?
I? Yeah,
Yes.
totally. And then you have people saying you shouldn't sell this, and other people be like, oh, you should totally do. That's amazing, right? So I think what I wasn't prepared for was the emotional roller coaster that I was going to go through with that. Um, but in the end, what happened was, luckily that it was I could see it through like this. This is the storm, and on the other side of this storm is the breakthrough and the completion, and then it kind of winds down. So I think for any agency owner that's thinking about selling, there is that storm. It's gonna get tougher. It's gonna get busy. You're going to go through the storm, and then you will eventually come out that other side. Even if you don't sell the business, you learn a ton of about your business along the way,
Well, I tell people, when legit people because there's lots of people that reach out and be like, "Oh, we want to buy you," and then they're
Yeah,
scumbags,
totally.
right?
Yeah.
But I say, like, for legit people, you should go through the process because, like you said, Roy, you're going to learn a ton, and then you're going to really know. Because I went through it a couple times before we actually sold in order to learn more about like what do they need. So then when we finally did go through it for real, we had everything like here it is, boom, boom, boom. Like there was still that emotional roller coaster. And
Hmm.
I think I flipped a coin to decide if I was going to do it or not. Like literally, like, it was like
Yeah.
50-50. It all worked out really well.
Yeah.
What was the turning point for you? Because you're going ups and down. Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. What was the turning point for you when you were like, all right, I'll do it?
Um,
And how
well,
close was it to the close? Was it like the night before?
yeah, like if you talk to Thomas, he'll say, "Yeah, this was one of the more messy negotiations that we had gone through because there was just so much back and forth, and I was really fighting to have peace with the deal. So I was fighting for things that I wasn't necessarily happy with up front. But to answer the question, yeah, the turning point. I mean, I prayed through it a lot. I'm a man of faith, and that was one thing that Thomas and I really connected on was, that spiritual component. But praying through it a lot was really important for me. But I think at the same time, the turning point was some of the things that were happening in the periphery of my life at that time. And in the periphery, like the business metrics made sense, everything lined up. I love the guys at Republics. I was really connecting with them. All of those things lined up. And I have kind of like a laundry list of things that I think any person that's selling their business should check off in doing any deal. But the real pivot for me was things that were happening around me, like, and it might sound morbid, but I had a friend and his brother passed suddenly. Like that was huge. Like again, I go back to the things like cost, and this is just my own experience around like what was the cost? What is the cost? Because everything has a cost. There's an upside, but there's a cost to getting there. And so for me, it was really like those periphery things that had me say, okay, you know what? I think life is pointing me in this direction to do this because I want to free up myself to be more present as a father, more present as a husband, be more kickstart some things that ventures that I've wanted to do, just haven't had time to do. So all those like soft lifestyle components really had an impact, and I think it's just important to consider that. Like, although for me, anyways, was one of the biggest transactions I'd ever have to do from a business perspective. um it's not just about the money, it's these what are you gaining from this, and if it's equitable on both sides, then it makes sense, it should make sense, right? Because if
Yeah.
you just think about the money part of it, um you might make a decision that you regret later, right? You have to really be happy with the deal at the end of the day, and I think for people that are chasing the money, they might be unhappy because they'll sacrifice like working with a buyer who you don't really like, but they gave you the best offer. And that's not always the best decision to make when you're doing the deal. Like you got to really like the people you're going to work with because you're going to continue, hopefully, to work with them. So it's just those kind of factors that crept into my decision making process.
What's life like now?
You know what? Nothing's really changed other than I just feel more at peace with everything. There's this, and you can relate to this, like being in leadership, being an owner of a business and in leadership position is pretty isolating, lonely place because I mean, even your spouse may not be able to understand truly what you're going through unless they were a agency leader or owner before. And so I think for me, I needed that sense of community, and I needed a team of people to bounce these agency specific, leadership specific ideas off of. And um, being a part of Republics has provided that. I still run the business on a day to day. That was really key, I think, for our communication to clients and the staff, that I still be at the helm, and that's still part of the plan. So at least from a day to day, it hasn't really changed, but the weightiness of full ownership has lifted, and that's actually freed me up to be more open and be more inspired. And think even bigger than before. Like we're now doing joint pitches with other agencies to bigger clients that we didn't have access to before, on one hand, and even clients that we did have access to, do have access to, we can pitch bigger ideas. So that's, for me, such a huge accomplishment, not only in building a business from nothing to where it is today, where, like you say, most businesses think about selling when they're on the downspout, like, and then they go bankrupt, right? Like 80% of businesses fail. So we're in that small margin of businesses that have been successful, and so that's a huge accomplishment for me. And I'm kind of like walking around with a little extra pep in my step, having achieved that, and now scaling the team and growing the business in a way that I feel really confident that we can set it up for the next 10 years of growth.
Yeah. And when you have that pressure off, right? You know, that you're not really worrying about money anymore. You can make decisions based on just what you feel rather than, oh, I need to take this deal. Right? Like,
Totally.
and what people don't realize is when you actually start making that switch, if you did that in the very beginning, you would have grown 5 times as fast.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And everybody always thinks they were like, oh, you've been through it, you now you guys have money, so it's easy for you guys to say that. But looking back, like, if I could tell myself again on that, I'd be like, dude, like, start with that from day one. And in the very beginning it might be a little tougher, but later on it'd be that much easier.
Yeah, like at least for us, like we had pretty good margins for the last 10 years. Like like as a corporation, we never had real money issues. Like we didn't have debt. We operated in with a 45-50% margin. So decision making around money for the business was never an issue. I think for me personally as well, it wasn't necessarily the money that makes me, because when you get a liquidity event like that, you have all kinds of other problems after that, right? Like, so
Lots of
so
cousins
so
coming out of the woodworks.
yeah, 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 right. Yeah, yeah. Ray from way back in the day, who you
Mhm.
haven't talked to in 20 years, or like, or just managing it at all. It poses other situations, but um, I think it's, there's something unique about calling yourself the singular owner, where every decision comes down to you. And again, nothing's changed. I'm still making every decision. Like Republics is really great that way, in the sense that they really want you to work autonomously, but at the same time have be part of this bigger
Mhm.
vision. So I'm still managing the business, but there's just this underlying weight of that's been lifted because you feel like you have support, right? There's other people who have been through this a million times that
Yeah.
know what you're going through, as opposed to like, boy, I feel like I'm really just kind of going through this on my own, and no one really understands. And so that part of it was really huge for me.
Awesome. Last question. If you had a billboard and you could put anything on it, what would it be? What would it say?
Um, like targeted to who? Anybody?
Anything.
Oh,
It doesn't
that's a
have
good
to be
question.
agency or business.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I love that question. It would be this: take your passions with you.
I like
And
that.
what I mean by that is, a lot of people get caught up in thinking, "Oh, I gotta find my passion. I gotta find my passion." And passion often gets related to what do you do, which isn't necessarily what your passion is. It's who you are. And that thing can be taken with you to whatever it is you're doing in the moment. And whether that's you're a problem solver, whether that's you want to make a human connection, whether you want to give to people, whether you want to build people up, whether you want to, it doesn't matter what it is. Just know that you can take it with you wherever you go. I took what I do in the music industry to digital marketing to help orthodontists and dentists. Like it's just, there's nothing correlated other than what my passion is, to solve problems. And
Yeah.
if that was my billboard, that's what it would be.
I love it. I love it. Well, where what's the website people can go and check out the agency
Sure,
outside of
it's Noodle Wave.
Republics?
Sure, yeah, it's noodlewavemedia.com. Noodle, like as a bowl of noodles, wave, ocean wave, media.com. I always say that.
Awesome, man. Well, Roy, thanks so much for coming on the show. And if you guys enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe, make sure you comment. And if you want to be around other amazing agency owners where we can see the things that you might not be able to see, because just like Roy was saying, like it's very isolating making your own decisions, and maybe you wanted some help with that. I'd love to invite all of you to go check out digitalagencyelite.com. This is our exclusive mastermind for very experienced agency owners. Go there now. And until next time, have a swank day.